Well, hello everybody and good evening. Welcome to the All Portable Discussion Zone. It's a bi-weekly live stream all about amateur radio portable ops. My name is Charlie. Call sign is November, Juliet 7 Victor. With me this evening is one of the show's two co-hosts, Brian, W7JET. And with me also tonight is our guest, Paula K9IR. Welcome, Paula. Also, a warm welcome to those of you who are watching via live and are in the chat room. If you have a comment or question, go ahead and pose that, and we will try to answer it. And also, don't forget that this show is converted to a podcast about 24 hours after the show. So let's go ahead and get things rolling, and let's get caught up on what's been going on, and then we'll introduce Paula again, and then we'll talk a little bit with her about Summits on the Air. So I'll just start real quick and talk a little bit about what I've been up to in ham radio over the last couple weeks. Pretty much nothing. I haven't really done anything really. I have a bunch of stuff backed up for me to do, some videos to do, but I just kind of been taking a break until yesterday. Yesterday I participated in the Arizona 10-Point Madness event, Summit to Summit event. So it was a great event. We had, I think, 25 or more people out on a summit simultaneously, all working each other and getting summit to summit contacts. And the great news here is that 10 meters was wide open. I know some people did better than I did, but in the 4 hours that I was on top of Aztec Peak, I got about 130 contacts. And of those, over 40 of them were summit to summit, and over 20 were DX into Europe. So great. It was a great fun time, and all that was mostly on 10 meters. Did a little bit of 2 meters, 40 meters. I got like 1 or 2 contacts, 20 meters, maybe 10. So it was really banging, and it is again today as well, I know. So anyway, that's what I've been up to. Plans to review this Morse code paddle here coming up. I got to record it still. It's just kind of been waiting there for me too. But anyway, let's go over to Brian. Brian, what have you been up to?
Well, let's see. Just keeping busy, flying, working. A little bit of everything. Doing some routine maintenance on the antenna farm. Playing radio, chasing DX, pushing the numbers up. Routine. Not anything really super exciting to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Good enough. All right, Paula. And what have you been doing the last few weeks?
Well, last couple of weeks, I've actually been involved with a couple of trips, August and September. In August, I took a backpacking trip into the Olympic National Park and actually activated a summit from there. I noticed our trail was going to go right past the summit. There's a little spur trail that goes up. I did that, and that was a lot of fun, a little bonus to the trip. I was hoping to do something similar on a recent trip to Italy. I just got back actually a week ago today. I was up in the Italian Alps in the Dolomites, and I had plans. I had made note of about 4 or 5 different summits that I was hoping to get to. Unfortunately, mostly because of snow that fell as early as the week before we arrived in the area, I couldn't get anywhere. And the particular summit that I took a series of cable cars to get to, a short trail to take me to the top, I was welcomed by a fence and a close sign and lots of snow. So unfortunately, that one didn't work out, but not for lack of effort.
Yeah, well, you never know how they go, right? Well,
Absolutely.
cool. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Paula. We're gonna dive in here and let people kind of know who you are. Although there's a few people in chat who do know who you are. Let me get a couple of things here real quick. KD2YDN says that he finally logged me yesterday. The conditions were really nice. But we also have my friend Dick here, K7ULM. Paula needs a more cowbell. I have never been able to log her.
Oh, I can start. Yeah, I've probably too.
Well, that's the story of QRP, isn't it?
That's exactly it.
Yeah, cool. Well, Paula, thank you for joining us again. Let's go ahead and dive right in, and so people can kind of get to know how wonderful you are. How would you describe yourself as a person outside of ham radio? Let's start there.
Interesting question. A person who is really endlessly interested in all that life has to offer. It's probably best reflected by my reading habits. A lot of times people will have very deliberate habits for reading. They'll focus on particular areas. And I've done that, but I'm also easily distracted into reading about a topic I'd never really considered before that just caught my eye, or I read a review of a book that sounds intriguing, and before you know it, I'm chugging off in that direction. So, I think that keeps life interesting. The variety that you have, I think, really, really helps with an approach like that. And
so you're an avid reader?
Very much so. Very much so.
What kind of books do you like to read mostly?
I've been tending more to nonfiction in a variety of areas, but I do enjoy a good novel, and I've got some of those squared away. I like graphic novels. I've got some of those waiting for me on the shelves as well. But right now I'm in the midst of reading the book Sapiens. And struggling to remember the author's name. He's written a few books. And also just like about 2/3 of the way through a book with a rather intriguing title, Jesus and John Wayne.
Interesting. Interesting.
And the two books really don't have a whole lot to do with each other.
Yeah, so you just dabble in it all. Cool.
But yeah, I was going to say, hence the variety.
Yeah. Well, so most people who are avid readers also write, whether they publish or not is a different story, but they at least write, maybe write in a journal. Do you write as well?
I don't. I've written a few articles for some ham radio publications for the, I don't think it's published anymore, but for DX Magazine. I had a 2-part series in there, actually, that documented the start of the W9DXCC convention that's hosted here in the Chicago area every September. And wrote an article for the National Contest Journal a number of years ago. But I'm not a writer, and I know that journaling is so recommended by people, and I understand why, but I don't do it.
Yeah.
I think I'm concerned that when I'm gone, somebody's going to find all these journals.
And they'll be enlightened and moved.
If only.
Yeah. All right, Paula. Cool. Well, so you said you're from Chicago. Is that where you were born and raised, or did you come from somewhere else?
I was born and raised in the Chicago burbs. Grew up in the suburb where I lived right across the street from the city, and kind of hung out in various locations ever since.
Very good. Okay. Well, give us a little background. What about your education, career, interests, stuff like that? What got you to this point in your life?
Yeah. Career-wise, I would say I had a couple of different things that I focused on. I started out practicing law for about 20 some years, and then went back to school, got a master's degree in it was called telecommunications, but it really covered a variety of topics in the computer and software and world, and ended up being a business and technology consultant, but focusing primarily on the legal vertical. So I was still working with lawyers, or still working in legal, but now helping lawyers understand better how to run their practices better from a business standpoint. So how does ham radio come in with all of that? Well, way back when I was an undergraduate, I did spend the equivalent of about a year in the EE department of the university I went to. And because I had that interest in electronics, determined that my love of electronics might very well be destroyed by formal education in the area. And if that makes any sense. And so I pulled out of that program, but it was very useful in the meantime. I took a number of courses, including a whole year of calculus that was truly enlightening. But it was in the last quarter of my university time that I took advantage of a class being run by the campus ham radio club to get my first license.
Huh. Very cool. So have you been in ham radio since, or did you kind of go in and out, or how, because right now you're very active, but have you been since the beginning, or no?
I think like a lot of hams, we sometimes go kind of ebb and flow with the hobby, depending on what else is going on in our lives. So I did get, I was very busy at the beginning. To put some context on that, though, I took the test for the novice. This was back in 1976. So you didn't have to go down to the FCC for that, but you did have a written test, and then you had the code test, of course. And I passed both of those, but I had to wait that whole summer before I got my license, which arrived, I think, about 2 or 3 days before I started law school. So time was a challenge to get on the air, but I managed to make that time. What I did over the summer in the meantime, so I wouldn't forget the code, was I spent time listening and copying every night, because that was the only privilege I had at that point. Novices only had code, and they only had the license for a year. You had to upgrade. It was like up or out, I believe. So that, there I made more time. There were times when my career got kind of busy, getting married and et cetera, et cetera. So there were times where I missed out on a few things and I wasn't very active, and then I'd get back into it. I would say, though, over the last 20, 25 years, I've been more consistently engaged.
Yeah, good. Brian, do you have any questions at this time? Oh, he dropped out. He must have froze just in time, I guess, for him. Okay, cool. Well, so let me see here. That the author of that Sapiens is Yuval Noah Harari, I guess. Huh?
Right. Right.
Cool. All right. Well, so sounds like you are also into. So you started your Morse code with your novice. Can you talk about how you learned Morse code and kind of compare? Did you go up and down with that too, or is it just kind of been a long improvement, or how did that work out?
That's kind of an interesting story for me. I think it might be kind of unique for me. So the first class session for that license class I mentioned, we got the code. So we jotted down, everybody dutifully on a piece of paper, all the dits and das, or dots and dashes, that form the various characters and numbers and basic signs. And we were encouraged to practice, to go to the club station and do this and that. For whatever reason, I did not make time to do that. But I did practice the code in my head, walking to and from classes that week. And then the next week I attended class, and lo and behold, either I missed it or they just sprung it on us. They gave us the code test. And I passed the test, but I think for me, you have to bear in mind, if you think about what 5 words per minute sounds like when it's sent, there's a lot of time in between to figure out the characters.
For sure.
If you've learned them, not the right way, but if you've just learned, okay, let me go through my catalog in my head. Da, 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 da. Ah, B, okay. You've got the time to do that at 5 words a minute. And I'm sure that helped a lot for me to pass the code test. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I spent that summer, I had bought a radio. I had bought a TS520 over at Amateur Electronic Supply in Milwaukee. The class took a field trip up there one Saturday. And so I had this radio. I couldn't get on the air, but I had a simple antenna set up. And I was listening every night because I was frantic. I would forget the code. And then I get the license and I'm stuck. What I didn't realize was that by listening and copying code every night, I was actually increasing my speed.
Oh, nice.
Which is, just a typical habit that everybody uses to get better at Morse code. You just practice. Right. And everybody has to do it. So by the time I got the license, I was actually well above 5 words a minute.
Very cool. Cool. And then right now, what do you think your speed is, or where are you comfortable at, really? Comfortable,
just north of about 22, 23.
Yeah.
If I practice and tone up, or if I, had enough coffee in the morning, yeah. I can go as high as, the high 20s into, 30. But, for comfortable chit chat and stuff, I'm usually feeling a little bit better off around 23, 25 words a minute.
Good. And do you do just QSOs, like for Summits on the Air and all that, or do you actually do some rag chewing?
Well, I've never been much of a rag chewer on CW. I don't know what it is. I just haven't done that. I do like CW a lot. It's probably my favorite mode, and the mode of choice certainly for SOTA. I heard you talking earlier with Brian about DXing. Before I got involved with SOTA, my main focus in ham radio was DXing, and I would focus a lot on using CW quite a bit. So, but I have started recently. There's a friend of mine from the first radio club I belonged to, and he's up in age, but still very active on the air. He's always had focused on CW, and he likes to rag chew. He doesn't want a
Okay,
contest
good.
or any of that. He wants to rag chew. So I've set up a schedule with him once a week, and we get on the air. He's local here, and we chat on CW.
Nice.
So, I can provide him with somebody that can use the code, enjoys it, and give him somebody to chat with. So we've had a lot of fun with that.
That's perfect. That's awesome. I need to do that with somebody, but I haven't yet. I mean, I have opportunities, but it's just like
Good.
there's so many things you want to do, right? And it's just So
Exactly.
I'm glad you found time to in your schedule. Cool. All right. Well, so Morse code is kind of your preferred mode. Mine as well. What about how did you find Summits on the Air?
I wish I could remember that. Honestly, it is so frustrating to me that I don't remember that. I know that I first got involved with activating in 2016. But I also know that if I go back over my logs, I think I had some chases as early as 2014, 2015
okay.
in that time frame. And I don't know if I just stumbled upon it or what have you, and then gradually learned more about it, or I read something about it. I mean, I've racked my brain about it, and I just cannot recall what initially triggered my interest. But I do remember thinking, this is a perfect combination of two things I love to do: hiking and radio.
Yeah, that's kind of how I got into it as well. I had been hiking for a while, and I just also had been involved in ham radio, and somehow I finally stumbled upon it, and Brian said, hey, try this thing, and put those two together. It's just a dream made in heaven. It's it.
What's interesting to me also about SOTA, and I don't know why I didn't think of this, but I'm used to thinking of that part of the hobby in the context in which I got involved. Somebody already licensed, and then they found out, oh, SOTA, great, I'll start hiking, and then setting up a temporary station. But there are a lot of people I found in SOTA that came at it from the other direction. They were avid outdoors people, and they found out about SOTA, and they got a ham license in order to engage in SOTA.
Yeah, there's
very different, in the same journey, but kind of done in from the other direction. And I found that very cool and fascinating.
It is interesting. That's kind of how I came at it. Like I just mentioned, I was and still am a backpacker and hiker. But yeah, throwing the ham radio in, that's the way to do it, man. It gives you something to do when you're hanging in the hammock, right?
Right, absolutely.
Good. Okay, so it's interesting. There's this dichotomy, so to speak, of DXing, which you said you did in the early part, or like I guess before you did SOTA. And DXing obviously is high power, usually the big antennas with big towers and all that. And then you get Summits on the Air, which is really the opposite. It's QRP. So do you have a preference, or does it matter? I mean, do you prefer QRP now, or do you just whatever you have you take, or what's your thoughts there?
Generally, it's whatever works for what I want to do. So for SOTA, it would be nice to have more power, and there are people who will take at least outboard amps to give them 100 watts, but that's kind of a hefty load of gear for me to tote. I have to make a side note. I activated with Keith KR7RK.
Yes.
2 years ago when I took a trip to hike down into the Grand Canyon, and he happily hiked with an amp and a big battery to power it and a KX3. Thank God he was, he said, well, we'll use my radio for all of this. So I didn't have to pack mine in, but that's a bit much for me. So I prefer, using just the base power out of whatever radio I'm using. But if I think I need more gas for whatever reason, like if I'd had a chance to do the S2S event this weekend, I probably would have taken my KX3 because I can get up to 12 to 15 watts out on certain bands to maximize that. And there isn't a real big weight penalty for it. If I'm backpacking at this point, I do like I did in Olympic, and I would take my KH1, which worked beautifully out there with the whip antennas. But for DXing, if it's a new one, I mean, I've worked them all, but if North Korea comes up on a mode I've not worked them on, I'm not going to be shy about going full on QRO
or more, right?
Right. Or if it's a new band country, I'm going to go full on. Now, if I'm playing around and I've already got something confirmed on a band or mode, but I want to see if I can work them, I'll dial it back.
Yeah.
And see if I can work them, without having to put all the gas in.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's kind of me too. You just kind of use the ham radio tools that are available for whatever works, and yeah. So like yesterday, I was on Aztec Peak. It's a drive up, 100% drive up. So I took the pop up and the table and the chair, and I mean, nothing was connected to the vehicle, so I was all good. I just unpacked it all and 100 watts, and I was doing great. So, but then those hikes or backpacking trips, you can't take all that gear for sure. Yeah,
that's a bit. I mean, I for Olympic, I had to work myself up to the point of being able to handle up to 40 pounds, for 5 days. But I'd rather trim it down a bit and be kind of lean and mean when I do SOTA.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about your backpacking then. I've not had an activation with Keith yet. I do know he's very fit, and people have a hard time keeping up with him. KR7RK. I've done the Grand Canyon multiple times, and I love it. It's a great. I've done 3 or 4 different multiple day trips down in the Grand Canyon, different parts of it, not the same corridor all the whole time. And then I've also done the rim to rim in 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
So
that's impressive.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to do that again maybe soon, but it's not that easy. Last time I did it was 17 hours. So
I can full well understand that. We did it in February. So the advantage with that is, I guess, you don't have the oppressive heat, and you don't have to worry about, critters like rattlers coming in and stuff unexpectedly on the trail. But you don't get the North Rim because they close that off over the winter. And we actually ended up hiking back out the South Rim in a snowstorm, which we were mercifully mostly protected from. I mean, there was snow falling. There was snow on the trail in the last half, but we got the full brunt of what was essentially a blizzard, literally once our heads popped up above the rim. And there was all kinds of snow coming down and blowing. And they closed the park. We were supposed to get out that evening to go to Flagstaff. We did not get out of there that night. But we were lucky we got out the next morning, and most of us still made our flights. But the weather can be tricky at that time of year.
This is why we do it, though, Paula, right? The adventure.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't have traded it for anything. It was absolutely epic to hike out with that, and the way everything looked with the light snow falling and such. It was really cool.
Yeah. And I have a desire to do the Olympic at some point as well. It's on my list of ones that I'd like to do. I'm jealous that you did it. You said you were 5 days in the Olympic?
5 days and 4 nights. And the route we took, we were on the Solduck and the Hoh Valley trails. And if you look at a map of the trails in there, you'll see a peak called Bogashiel. And there is a little spur trail that goes off of Bogashiel that will take you actually to the summit. And I managed so when we were planning this trip, these were people out of a hiking club I belonged to in this area. The first thing I did, of course, was I checked to see if there were any summits that we would encounter, because that's my priority. And I found one. So I had a side discussion. We had a couple of guides, and I had a side discussion with the guide service. And wouldn't you know it, their logistics guy was like, "Oh yeah, I know all about SOTA." It was so cool. He wants to get his license and this and that, but he knew all about it. He goes, "Yeah, that'd be a great place for a lunch break and blah, blah, blah." So I'm like, it went from, I was going to kind of beg and plead for a little, like a 10, 15 minute window to operate. And there's actually a part of the trail before you take the spur that's in the activation zone. So I thought if I needed to, I would plead for the opportunity to spend 10 minutes right there at trail side to operate and get the requisite 4 contacts. But we had just enough time for me to scoot up right to the summit itself, which had a great view, by the way. So if you end up going in that area, definitely put that peak on your list.
For sure. Will do. Yeah. Well, Brian, you made it back, buddy.
Yeah. Had a little bit of a technology failure there, and we got everything going again.
Yeah. Jumper may have...
Well, I was a little delayed getting back from what I was doing, so I didn't get to do my normal restart before the show. So it decided, because there was apparently too much going on for this, 12-year-old desktop computer, that it needed to take a break.
Yeah. Well, you missed the best part. Paula talked all about her DX and how she's
Okay.
she's a DXer to like no one's business. I don't know if
Yes,
you knew that.
I saw that she's on the honor roll. I'm working toward that. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
You'll get there. You'll get there. You have some nice totals. I heard you when I first came on before we started, and those are some nice totals you've got working there, and you're at a good point in the cycle to really rack them up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I need 48 more to hit 1,500 in the challenge, and I got
Nice.
11 more to hit DXCC on 160. So that's
Well,
that's a big one for me.
You're way ahead of me on 160. I've never had very much of an antenna for 160. I'm hoping to resolve that by setting something up at my cabin up in Northwest Wisconsin, where I've got like 40 acres to play with.
Yeah.
But the noise level and the space I have with my home lot here is just not going to work for 160 anymore.
Yeah, I've got a heavily loaded 43-foot vertical. I built a matching network for it out of QST, and it's basically a rubber duck on 160, but I've managed to work 70 countries on that particular antenna. So it does what it needs to do. When the band's open, it's open, and having a receiving antenna has helped quite a bit. I kind of compare 160 to 6 meters with the behavior on the way it's open. You know, when it opens to Europe, it just opens up to one spot. It lasts for 45 minutes to like 2 hours, and then it's gone as quick as it opens.
Yeah. The frequencies we have at those two extremes really present their own challenges. And then, not to put out a sob story, but if when you're located in the Midwest, we refer to our location as the black hole, as in a black hole for RF. So we need to have a little bit more in the way of antennas and what a friend of mine calls goo. You need more goo, meaning basically more power.
Yes.
And whenever I read antenna reviews, like some guy will say, "Oh, this vertical is great and it works wonderful," and I'm like, "Well, he's on the Atlantic in North Carolina. That's like where the best propagation is to Europe. So yeah, he doesn't need hardly anything to work anybody from there. But if I took that same antenna and put it in my backyard, I don't think it would perform quite as impressively." And it's just because we're in the middle of the country, we've got a little bit more of a challenge to, for a domestic contest, we're gangbusters on 160, but for DX, it's a little trickier.
Well, you know what's funny? I had a good friend of mine. He passed away now. His call sign was KB9TYT. His name is Tim, and he lived in Rockford. So not up in your neck of the woods there. And the
call sounds familiar.
Tim was a great dude, really just a great guy. We spent many nights chewing on the air, and then another 2 hours sometimes talking on the phone afterward. He's just a great dude. But he had a 43-foot vertical with no radial system at all, just one 8-foot ground rod driven into the ground. Mm-hmm. And he had the soil in his area was fantastic for conductivity. So he didn't have any of the radials down at all, just a ground rod. And he ran most of the time barefoot 100 watts, and it sounded like he was running a kilowatt on that antenna.
Wow. So
it was just the right, wherever he was living in the Rockford area, the soil was just the right pH and everything, where it was gangbusters. I mean, perfect soil.
Yeah. And he may have had a little bit of an elevation. The state out that way is a little bit higher even than where I am. As you slope out to the northwest there. Yeah. Rockford's about 60 minutes to the west-northwest of me. Mm-hmm. And he might have had a very quiet location in terms of listening to.
Yeah.
Which helps a lot.
Yeah, he was just said, you always asked him. And then when he ran power, you knew he was running power. There was significant change in his signal. Yeah. But even at 100 watts, he was still on 40 meters, S9 plus 20 most of the time.
Wow. Very good. Very good. Before I forget, I just want to let you know, Charlie, that I don't want you to think that your stickers are going unused. So I've got my Hamvention sticker on this is the water bottle this went into Olympic with me. Typically, if I'm using electrolyte, that goes in here, and the regular water goes in my water bladder in my pack. So I didn't want you to think that it was going unused.
Cool. Yeah, I have mine. It's out of reach, but yeah, I have it on mine as well. That's cool. Thank you, Paula. So, Brian, any follow-up stuff before we move on to? I want to get back to the backpacking stuff for a minute.
No, go back to the backpacking stuff. I unfortunately was unable to hear any of that because I had zero connectivity because my computer was going through its gymnastics. So I'm all back. So I'm going to hang out and I'll enjoy the back and forth for a little bit, and then maybe I'll throw in a few pithy comments here and there.
Yeah, please do.
Color analyst, that's my job.
That's right. Let's see. There's one comment here. Hoping to beat winter here and get a couple of antennas up for winter, and come spring put some better ones up. A hamstick, octopus, and a ribocov with auto tuner at bottom. Okay, Arnold.
Ooh.
I'm sure Brian and Paula knows what that means, but I don't.
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that. That sounds intriguing.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So back to the backpacking stuff, Paula. That backpacking trip sounds fun. Sandy and I, my wife and I, are have something planned probably in another month to go do a short backpacking trip, probably just an overnighter, but we'd love to do it as well. And so anyway, what about maybe what's your favorite or most memorable backpacking trip that you've been on that involved ham radio?
Well, this is going to be really funny because it's a real easy question for me to answer because theoretically, I've only been on one backpacking trip and I happened to activate during it, and it was that Olympic trip.
It was. Okay.
I've had the gear to do backpacking. I've kind of accumulated my kit over several years, and I've used it even when I go car camping. I've used it partly with my SOTA activations, partly with car camping. So I kind of built it up over time, used various pieces of it, but never rolled it all formally into a backpacking trip. So this was kind of in many ways, my first foray. I mean, it's not that I haven't slept in a backpacking tent with a quilt and an inflatable pad and cooked meals on a portable stove. I just never did it as part of a formal trip before.
Wow. Well, Paula, this is exciting. Then this is amazing. I thought you were like an old pro. You seem like it because, but that's great. So you're just at the beginning of your backpacking adventure, so to speak. Although, like you said, you've got everything and you, but then you planned this trip out with this group of people, and you went on your first backpacking trip, and it was a SOTA trip. That is amazing. That's great.
Yeah. I actually have. So my plan now that I've done proof of concept for myself that it really can work and have a much better idea what it requires. My hope is actually next year to take a trip to Isle Royale, where there are 4 summits. They've all been activated before, but I don't think anybody has had the opportunity to activate all 4 of them as part of a single trip there.
Oh, I don't know where Isle Royale is.
It's in Lake Superior. And you can access it. It's physically closer to Minnesota, way up along that northeast side of Minnesota. But it also is typically accessed from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. There's that part of Michigan way up there in the UP that's got, I forget the name of the harbor, but it's got the little hook there that goes into the lake.
Right.
I think it's called Copper Harbor. And it's actually, there's a rare grid there at the very tip. And there's a summit there that I've investigated in terms of who I need to contact to get permission to operate from there. So if I decide to have my access be from the UP rather than from Minnesota, on my return, I may very well go and do a rare grid activation where I would run some power with a generator and also do obviously a QRP battery powered activation of a new summit.
Oh, good. That's great. That's awesome. So, even though you've not been on backpacking trips, you have been all over the country, Paula. You've been all over the country with your hiking. And if for those who may not know, I checked just to be sure, you're halfway through to getting your 3rd mountain goat. And I don't know of any, maybe 1 or 2 female activators that have more. I'm sure there are more, but I mean, personally, I don't know anybody except for maybe Kay in Tucson that has that many activations under their belt. So I know you went to you go to the camp out. Maybe talk a little bit about that and other places that you've been. Maybe some of the more interesting places that you've been when you've gone out and done your summits on the air activations.
So I have done a lot of travel because it's pretty apparent when you look at the map. There's not a whole lot of summits real close to where I live. There are. I'm an assistant association manager for the 9 area, and there are summits in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, but they're pretty spread out. and it's not nearly the number that you have in a location like Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, etc. So once you've worked a lot of the summits in the Midwest, you need to spread your wings and make those trips. The campouts have been perfect for that. I remember the first campout I went to, and it was just an absolute treat. It was a W4 campout, which Pat, WW4D, organizes. And he does a great job. He does just enough organizing to corral all the cats together without making it, too organized to the point where you feel like you don't have the freedom to activate where you want to go.
Right.
And I've gotten a lot of different summits activated in that way. There's a spring camp out and a fall camp out. The fall camp out is actually just wrapping up today, I think, as we speak. And I didn't have a chance to go out for that. In fact, there was question whether anybody was going to be able to go out to that because it's in North Georgia. And of course, with Hurricane Helene, there was some question about, would the campground even be open? Would there be an alternative campground they could use? Will the trails be open, et cetera, et cetera? The good news is I think they were able to go ahead. I'm sure there were some summits that could not be accessed. Excuse me. And there were some summits, I think the local powers that be were encouraging people not to go into certain areas like Springer Mountain at the very beginning of the AT. But it's a great way to get to what might be a new area for somebody like it was for me to do some activations. There's usually a wealth of people there that are very familiar with the area and can help you pick summits, can even go with you for activations. You can join a small group of people. And there's also a good number of new people that join us every year and then come back. So it's kind of a growing, slow but steadily growing group of people that get together. It's also a great social exercise as well. Pardon me for 1 second. I don't know why my throat is going crazy here. I think one of the points you shared with me before tonight was the social aspect of Summits on the Air. And I think the campouts are a great example of that. You have a wealth of people. You come back every evening. You can go to various campsites where people might all gather at a particular campsite just to socialize, have a beer or other beverage, chit chat if there's questions about gear or if there's something that's broken that needs to be fixed, whatever it is. You've got all the help there in the world you could possibly want. And it's something that I was sorry. I've actually missed both campouts this year for various reasons. And I was sorry to do that because I haven't seen my friends then. I've maybe talked with them on the air, but I haven't had a chance to visit with them twice a year like I usually do. So I'm hoping to make up for that next year. But it's a great way to do that. In W1 land, Bob AC1Z runs a great camp out there. I've only gone once. It's a little bit of a distance for me. It's 2 heavy days of driving for me to get there. Yeah. So it's a little bit more difficult to schedule that, but he runs it's a great camp out there. Amy, I haven't gotten out to Oregon yet, but AG7GP runs another great camp out that has been growing by leaps and bounds over in Seven Land there in Oregon where she lives. So there's some great opportunities. I think there's one up in South Dakota too that I've not gone to. I don't think they had it this year. But it's a great opportunity to get you into an unfamiliar area and make sure you're familiar with it, make some new friends, see some old friends, and just have some fun.
Yeah, that's good. I've not been to any of the campouts except for the Southern California one at Big Bear. I went to that one, which was great. I enjoyed that a lot. But plan on maybe at some point joining in some of those in Oregon and the Northeast. Those would be fun. So yeah, the question kind of was when I asked you earlier, it's just kind of, is there a social component to participating in Summits on the Air? And I was hoping you'd talk a little bit about that. So how does the camp out usually go in the afternoon, evening hours? I mean, what do they usually do at the campouts when you're not doing SOTA?
Well, there's usually an opportunity one of the evenings, at least with the W4 campouts, one of the evenings we may get together at a local brew pub or restaurant I know that was the plan for, that's been the plan the last few times. And that's usually a lot of fun and just, a great way to get away from camp food and kind of stretch your legs and return to a little bit of civilization, if you will. And then there's usually a potluck dinner on Saturday night. So, these events will usually start like Wednesday or Thursday, and they'll go through Sunday, but people come and go within that time frame. I usually head out earlier. So if I'm going to drive all that way, I'm like, let me make it a week-long thing. So I'll probably show up Sunday or Monday before and stay through, that Monday and get a good week's worth of activating in. But they'll do a potluck. So everybody kind of signs up and lets everybody know ahead of time what they're going to bring. And those have been great. Those have been really great. I mean, it's amazing some of the food that people put together. K2JB is the master of the Dutch oven.
Dean.
If you want to know how to work a Dutch oven, I think he could make almost anything.
Yeah. I was really interested in, not interested. I was really into Dutch ovens. I was in a club and everything, Dutch oven club at one point.
Oh, then
I know all about it too. Yeah. I have a whole bunch, and I have probably 5 or 6 Dutch ovens in my shed. So yeah. Cool.
I've had some of Charlie's Dutch oven cooking, actually.
Oh, you have? Oh, that's right. That's right. The Mountain Man breakfast, right?
Yeah.
Also the dessert, the cobbler at dinner.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. The dessert is people queue up for that. It can get dangerous in that line. It's really good.
It's good for the glucose spikes.
We have a great time with that. And like I said, we get some new folks, and I think the fact that people return after they've come for their first time is a great testament to the fact that, the campouts are very welcoming, very encouraging. And they certainly have helped me a lot. I mean, it has really expanded my participation in that part of our hobby. And I think our hobby generally, the whole Elmer principle, has really helped make it a very welcoming hobby. But I find SOTA, I think, to be particularly welcoming. Yeah. I mean, if you're willing to, do what you need to do and slog up somewhere with a radio and set up a temporary station and operate, I don't think people much care anything else about who you are. You're one of the group, and you're very welcome to join in with folks.
Yeah, I agree. Let me recognize Zippy here. So Zippy gives a donation of $3. He is always there, always supportive of the channel. I really appreciate Zippy and what he does for us. So thank you so much for your contribution again tonight. Let's see. So the next thing I wanted to ask you, Paula, I mean, that's great what you're talking about, the social component. I don't know what Brian's experience is, but mine is certainly the exact same. I mean, it's just everywhere you go, and there's just pockets of communities all throughout the United States, and every one of them is very welcoming and makes you just feel like you're a part of the team from the very beginning.
Yeah, there's a lot of other folks that I hope to have a chance to operate with in different parts of the country. So I mentioned earlier I had a chance to operate with Keith, and I had the Grand Canyon trip, and I had talked with Keith before, and I contacted him and I said, that time of year, what would you suggest? Could we maybe do a joint activation? And he really made it happen. And made me feel very welcome. The day before, I went out to dinner with he and his wife. We had a great time. Learned a little bit more about their life there in Arizona and such. And it was just great camaraderie to get together with somebody that I talked with before, that I worked on the air, and now we're going to go off and activate together.
Yeah. Brian, did you have something you were going to add?
Oh no, I was just going to say that the social aspect of the ham radio in general is what makes the hobby what it is. The whole hobby is about communicating, and the face-to-face stuff is great. And, Dayton is a big part of that for me and a lot of people, especially in this group, because I think we've all been there together multiple times. And even locally here, our get-togethers for food, even doing activations with multiple people. The solitary stuff is fun, but it's always fun when you do it with somebody. It's even more fun when you get to go with somebody else, because then there's plenty of stories to tell about, me falling, or, Charlie, exactly. Charlie talking to his walking stick endlessly.
Yes.
That's a great point, Brian. Most of my activations have been solo. And certainly before I started going to the campouts, they definitely were solo. And that's fine. I mean, you do what you need to do. And we don't have summits here. I think that to some degree contributes to the absence of, a substantial chaser community. I have great chasers here that are friends of mine, but it's not like as pervasive as you might find elsewhere in the country where there's more summits. And I always find it much more fun to, even if I go activate by myself, to come back like to a base camp and be able to trade stories with people. Or, one time I got back and I said, oh God, I got to tell you this story about this bear I encountered, bushwhacking up to Sheriff's Knob and all of this. And, there's somebody you can talk with about that and have some fun trading stories and stuff and trading intel. Like, oh, I just headed out there, don't even bother trying to go unless you've got 4-wheel drive or whatever.
Right.
I mean, there's all kinds of information that you get at these campouts. It's really useful.
Yeah, for sure. Let me also recognize Don, K9IR. He's a member for 2 months now. He says, thanks for having such great guests on it. I agree, especially with Paula today. Thank you so much for being here again. And I think that Adam, K6ARK, also agrees.
Hey, all right, Adam. Oh God, Adam, I have Adam's Pico paddle version of his paddles. I have several different kits for the balance, one of which I'm using is for my mainstay NFED. So he makes great stuff. Great guy. I love seeing him. I usually just see him at Dayton every year, but I love visiting with him. And he's so creative. It's just amazing.
Yeah, me too. Arnold Grubbs, thank you so much. Arnold just became a YouTube member. I mean, this is great. Thank you. I hope it's worth it for you, and appreciate your contribution there. Let's go ahead. We've got a little bit of time left. I wanted to ask you what the Queens of the Mountain is, because that's something that I think needs to be promoted much more. And so if you can take a minute and let us know what that's all about. Absolutely.
Happy to do that. So Queens of the Mountains is actually the brainchild of Amy, AG7GP. Amy and I realized, I think it was late last year, early this year, that we were kind of working at that time in parallel with each other, looking for some activities to generate more interest on the part of YLs in SOTA, and provide more opportunities for us to kind of get to know each other and operate together. And when we learned about our parallel interests, it got off the parallel track and intersected and started working together. And she had this idea for a Queens of the Mountains event, basically over like a 2-day period, encouraging YLs. We started just in the U.S. to get to summits and activate, and also to chase if you couldn't get to a summit. And we tried to get people active in every U.S. call area, and I think we just missed 2 this year. And the other goal was to, if people would do so, to apply for the special 1-by-1 calls that can be issued. So we went through a whole process to figure out how to do that. We had a little FAQ that illustrated how people could apply for that in the call area from which they were going to activate. So we had special call signs as well. And they followed, I think the format was like W9Q, for example, or W7Q. And so we had a lot of fun with that. And actually the response this year was just tremendous. We had the event in early June. One of the struggles with any new event is, what weekend do I pick where there aren't already a million other things going on, especially contests?
Yes.
But we did find a weekend that seemed to work pretty well. Nothing is conflict free, but it seemed like a little bit quieter weekend. Our plans for next year are to open it up for YLs around the world. So obviously they won't be applying for 1-by-1 calls, although if their home countries have some sort of program like that, that would certainly be a welcome addition. And we'll continue, I think, to encourage US-based YLs to apply for those as well. We also had, as part of the participation, not only recognizing the activators, but also recognizing chasers as well. So we had a series of achievements, and depending on, you would get a certificate that we would send out based on the number of achievements that you would reach, working so many YLs, working summit to summit, working DX, et cetera, et cetera. I think W6 LOR won we have a special award if you achieved, I think it was 5 of the 6 achievements. And she did that, and she got the special K9IR award in honor of Liz, who, yes, by the way, I think had 2 mountain goats and was probably on the way to her 3rd before sadly she passed away. But talk about somebody who accomplished so much. And, as part of the award, the write-up that we had noted that you would never know by her QRZ page, and you'd never know by working her on the air, that Liz was blind. And yet she made it to all these summits, became a goat twice over. I mean, there you go. There's the picture that we posted online for our winner, and we got a special glass and everything with the SOTA logo and a mention of Liz and her call sign. But we thought somebody who demonstrated such dedication, just not going to be denied participating in an activity that she clearly loved. She wasn't going to let anything stand in her way. And we thought that was something worth honoring, and that somebody who made those achievements in the Queens of the Mountains event should receive an award that would be in her memory.
Yeah, this is great. It's fantastic. What are some of the benefits to the YLs in participating in this? I mean, I don't want to get too far into it, but I mean, did you see any? I mean, what's the real purpose behind it? I mean, it obviously is to have fun. You want to get YLs out there. Is there anything more to it than that?
Well, I think there were a number of YLs, I think, that took advantage of the event to collaborate on their activation. So they would get together and activate. And I don't know how much of that is actually going on right now within the within the SOTA YL community. And I don't think it's for lack of interest. It may be a little bit for lack of opportunity, or just not being aware that, hey, there's some other people that are actually interested in doing that. And I think there's a certain amount of camaraderie that's generated by, getting involved with something that maybe people think that we wouldn't necessarily do, that it might be unusual for us to do. And actually to illustrate by our participation that it's anything but unusual, that we're just as engaged in this part of the hobby as anybody else. But I think there was a certain amount of, I almost hesitate to use this term because I don't want to, say the
girl power,
say the wrong thing, like a sisterhood sort of thing, where there's a certain bond. And I think actually part of what got Amy thinking about this kind of event was one of the first W70 campouts that she hosted. There were a number of women that attended that, and a number of them that got together. In fact, I think she may have posted a picture online about that at one point for 1 year for the participants. And I think, they kind of recognized that, hey, this is really fun. Maybe we should, and then she thought maybe we should make a bigger event out of this, like nationwide and now worldwide. Not that we can all get together on one summit, but that groups of us can get together and have fun the same way that we had fun at this camp out. Yeah. So I think that kind of helped generate it. Sometimes things that you put together or that you have fun with surprise you in just how well they work out and the ways that they work out. So you might not necessarily have as your target with a camp out, for example, that, wow, we're going to feel really great, just a group of women getting out there and activating. But that happens and you realize, wow, that really was fun. Can we do that again? And so I think the Queens of the Mountains had, it, in many ways, its genesis, its impetus from Amy's experience with that camp out.
Yeah, I agree. I can't speak for Brian. His wife is a ham radio operator, but a couple things. One, when we have our field day, I'm always applauding when I see his wife, my wife, and Dan's wife behind the radio, trying to work their contacts, and I just love seeing that. And a second thing is that I just love that my wife is going for her mountain goat, and she's enthusiastic about it, and I support her for that. I mean, if she wasn't interested, it'd be okay, but I really love that, and I love this whole thing about promoting that a little bit more. And Adam K6ARK again, he says Amy is an amazing community builder. I think she is too. She's a little camera shy. I've tried to get her on the show a couple times, and she keeps putting me off. But I'll get her. But anything to add, Brian?
No, I was going to say the same thing as it's always good to see the diversity and everybody out there having a good time and just it's just a lot of times, especially with our club, the people that seem to do the best are the ladies, at least when it comes to field day.
Yeah, well, with voice on sideband, you get that female voice out there, and I call it the natural DX filter. It just kind of cuts right through, even in a pile up and such.
Oh, it's the 20 dB advantage for sure.
Exactly. Well, and it's I think it's great when spouses get engaged. When my husband was alive, he was not a ham radio operator. I mean, funnily, he was involved in broadcasting professionally, but he wasn't a ham radio operator. But he could appreciate the hobby. He'd been a shortwave listener when he was much younger, and so he understood. And I didn't have the issue of. I think some people in audio circles, which is male predominant, talk about the WAF, the wife acceptance factor. I didn't have to worry about the equivalent of that when I wanted to put a tower in the backyard or have set up some antennas or something. My husband was totally on board with all of that, even though he wasn't going to be using any of it.
That's funny. A good friend of mine, Mark, W4MPS, says, love to see the ladies in our hobby, especially love working the YLs on CW. I couldn't agree more. That's great. All right. Well, let's see. One more question is all we have time for. It's running down. If Brian, if you don't have any others, and I'll just throw one more out.
Nope, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So it's going to be who in the ham radio community do you admire? And it could be more than one or whatever. Just who do you admire in the ham radio community?
Wow. There are so many people that I have learned from, whether overtly with them Elmering me or just observing, just watching what they do. And I hate to waffle on this, but I would feel if I identified any one person, I'd be excluding so many other people that have helped me so much in this hobby. So maybe I'll answer it by saying everybody who has taken a moment, and put up with whatever idiocy I was demonstrating to help me out in this hobby. When I make a mistake in this hobby, I tell people, well, that I have to remind myself it's amateur radio. It's not professional radio. So, I can do some dumb things, but I've had so many people help me out, and I wouldn't be anywhere near what I've done in this hobby without that help. So if I can say that I admire most the community of people that have been willing to work with me and help me, that's my answer.
Okay, I'll let you get away with it.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's going to be it for us, Paula. I really appreciate you joining us. It's been a really fun interview. I'll let you, if there's any other things you want to add or any other comments you'd like to make, we'll give you a minute to do that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I actually had a lot of fun with this. I've met you before and talked with you both over at Dayton and such, and this has really been fun. I've got to become a subscriber here too, and listen to future interviews, which I'm looking forward to doing. So thank you so much for that, and just keep going with what you're doing. Clearly, you have a good audience here, and a lot of people that are interested. So you can't do better than that.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. Appreciate it. All right, well, let's just thank all the guests who are listening now. Those of you who'll be listening later, everybody in the chat, thank you so much for joining us. Paula is an amazing person. We found out we already knew that though, and so appreciate you. Thank you so much for that. And Brian, I'll let you close it out, and then we'll end.
I was going to say, Paula, it was great seeing you again. Great to chat with you. Always a pleasure to see you in person, because it's been, I think, every Dayton trip we've run into each other now. And it's consistent for about 3 years. So looking forward to the next one. And it's so nice to catch you online here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it as well, Brian.
All right. Bye,
See you,
everybody.